There were 3 damp issues in this property, but the key one was the front bay. Here we see skirting board made from plaster in the round bay. The plaster has blistering from calcium sulfate salts becoming damp and migrating to the surface of the plaster. In this case, it will be coming from underneath. We'll be looking underneath the bay, looking at the neighbour's bay, and looking at the other damp issues, as well as finding a way of measuring the damp so that we can see improvements over time following my recommendations. Looking immediately outside, we see that a drive has been built up with the water pouring down the drive towards the house. And even though on the right of this image there is a drain, water isn't pouring naturally down the drain, and in fact they had to unblock it. Looking on the neighbour side of the property, there's high damp meter reading and signs of dampness in exactly the same place. On their side of their bay, there's also signs of water build-up. There isn't, although the plinth is cement base, there has been around the join with the ground, there isn't a fillet of cement, so water can get in between the ground and the plinth. I don't necessarily think that this is the cause of your dampness, but ideally you should have a plinth that comes up to about 500-600 mil above the ground, and there should be a fillet of cement between the plinth and the floor, and this should drain away, so it looks to me as though water will naturally collect down here, and an acro drain is the simplest way of doing it, and you'd have one that then drains in there. You probably have a horizontal drain sort of in front, and then that just drains in there.
So it just takes the water.
Oh. You'd probably go the whole way.
Oh, okay.
So long as it's draining away.
Yeah.
So you've got a risk of water going into the subfloor void, and we'll have a look at that. Hopefully you don't have that. Using a hygrometer probe, we found that there were high levels of relative humidity in the subfloor void, indicating dampness down there. So I raised the timber to have a look.
The timber's root. So the good news is that there is it's only early stage rot. It's damp. It's marginally damp. It smells worse than it is. I'm going to look underneath the floor. I mean, I would say, because you haven't really changed anything for a very long time, so what happens is when you get heavy deluge, you're getting water through here, but it's then drying out, and there is some ventilation. You're very near to a subfloor vent. You can see the damp-proof course, and essentially the outside, I don't know if it's out of focus there, but the outside is going to be above the damp-proof course. I put it on film so you can see it, but there's the damp-proof course and the dampness is there. And you get, what happens is condensation forms above the damp-proof course and then goes up. This is, as I said right at the beginning, is a sort of plaster type material. So it's sort of looking like timber, but it isn't timber. And these calcium sulfate salts, they're benign, they don't do anything, but you know, it's because of damp. It's not like rot or anything that can cause structural damage.
It was probably those that was up the wall when we bought the house. It looked like those.
Well, the things that you showed me right at the beginning, those are calcium sulfate salts as well. So it's what we discussed. So there are twofold issues. One is I would say that in this case it's primarily the water coming in from the outside because of the drive that is built up and lack of drainage. So I put in an echo drain. you want to keep the ventilation, so you should uncover that other vent, which I did by taking the timber. If you want to put something over it, you can do to stop water getting in, but I don't think that's the primary issue. It's lack of, you want to keep as much. You would have rot if you hadn't had ventilation here. You'd almost certainly have dry rot here. But you have got some ventilation. It's actually very near to a vent, so that's why it's damper than you might think, considering that there's only marginal rot, if that makes sense. But I do think you're getting some condensation as well. So two remedies, and I'll detail them. Oh, and the hygroscopic salts upstairs.
Here's a thermal image camera highlighting heat loss, where blue is colder than red and orange. Base of the wall is always going to be colder and therefore at greater risk of condensation. And with a bay, an unheated bay, there's high risk of condensation, especially in winter. Upstairs there are a few damp dots on a wall where there had been a chimney breast. We had a look on the other side of the wall and it was dry. So here are some details of the cause, which will be from hygroscopic salts. That's calcium nitrate's the most common one in the residential environment, and it comes from the historic burning of coal in particular.
So with this, it's first floor, it's internal. It looks like damp. It's actually showing relatively minimal levels of vapour. I'll do a thermal image, but that will be caused by hygroscopic salts. These are salts that come from the historic burning of coal principally. It's because the chimney breast used to be here and it's been removed. You can't do anything about it other than hide it. Zinza, an oil-based primer, will work well. And that it's very minor. It wouldn't even necessarily be picked up, but I'm guessing you weren't particularly bothered about it. It's just that since I was coming new,
Well,
it just
surprised us that it was something like,
it's internal, first
Just
floor.
sort of
There's
it was a bit
there's
weird.
no
It was
water
like-
either side.
No, exactly.
That
was the thing. It was like, well, why would that suddenly appear? It was
It's
our
often people say that it's rising damp, but because groundwater also contains hygroscopic salts, but it'll be calcium nitrate. But very simple solution.
Okay.
So let's focus downstairs.
So the third area is downstairs. This is an internal wall, party wall with a neighbour. It was dry on the other side of the wall, or at least there were high meter readings, but it wasn't as damp as this side.
Here is this wall was added. So this used to be the,
I see.
the
This is
dining
the
room
old-
was from here. So that wall is essentially. Well, no.
So you want to measure it with one of these meters called Doctor Meter. They cost about £25. They're really worthwhile. And just this is showing 100% relative humidity at the moment. I've got two approaches to it. One is to deal with the vapor, and the other one is as a sort of secondary, is to reduce the absorption. So you've got an extra risk here because you've got almost certainly you've got cold water running down there. Either the piping to the utility area, or the piping to the radiator, which when not in use is going to cause cold water to be in that area. It will act as a sort of reverse heating system, but only marginally, but enough to cause heat loss. You've also got the solid floor, and solid floors are impermeable, so water won't be absorbed into it. If there's ever any washing of the floor, then it can't be absorbed into the floor, but it can be absorbed into the wall, so that increases the risk there.
Okay.
And secondly, they're vulnerable to condensation. But obviously, if the heating system is on constantly, regularly, then that's less likely to be a cause. But you get this area of risk. So the simplest thing to do, but it's a secondary intervention and not dealing with the root cause, is to take the skirting board off and run a bead of thixotropic cream, siloxane. I'll give you more details. But yeah, that, and then together they'll work. But the root cause almost certainly is the vapor, because we know there's no leak in the system. Oh, one thing I haven't asked you is, do you ever have a drop off in the boiler on the
It can, well, only I know sometimes the pressure goes.
Pressure,
yeah,
yeah.
the pressure has dropped.
and
Yeah.
what do you top it up or?
Yeah, it's just well with the I don't know, whatever I do
Okay,
to it to bring the pressure back up.
How often do you do that?
It's nothing. I've done it. I don't know. It's difficult because since because the new boiler.
Is it annually? Biannually?
Once every 2 years, maybe.
Okay, that shouldn't be too bad. There can be a number of reasons for it, but one of them can be a leak. But this doesn't look like a leak. And it doesn't look like rising damp. It looks like standard condensation.
Okay.
And given that you have signs of condensation elsewhere, I think, and plus you're drying your clothes internally.
Sorry for this poor graphic, but what I'm trying to illustrate is water pouring off the drive into the bay, and it needs a good drainage system such as an ACO drain to draw the water away from the drive into the gully safely away. And in addition, you have a humidity issue that so many people do have as well.